Well,
all right, let's rock.
Okay, well, welcome back, everyone, to our Security Enablement series here. Today, we are joined by Leif Jackson, the VP of our Content and Community team here at Cybrary. And today, we're going to be talking about the 2017 Equifax hack. So, Leif, for those who don't know, can give us like a brief description of what that was and kind of what happened.
Yeah, actually, I worked there during the period, so it was an interesting time. I was leading new product development for the marketing department for Equifax, and I think it was about 145 million customers were breached, and it was a loss of information for these customers that obviously wasn't their choice, right? Yeah. Ultimately, Equifax did not protect their clients' data, right? And so some of which they didn't even know that they had it, right? Yeah. It was a tough time for Equifax.
Yeah. So I mean, with this security breach and the hack, and it lost 145 million people's data and everything. I mean, was security something that you guys had spoken about before this had happened? Like, was that like a part of onboarding and like continuous training and stuff you guys have been doing?
Yeah, so like similar to most companies that I found actually in working at Cybrary for a bit over a year, security is always thought of at the end of the process, yeah. Right? So like basically I would go through like, hey, is this the right market, like the business case for applications or for the data products that we had.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the process, it was like, oh, here comes this security team, yeah. Right? Like, and like, okay, it's a yes/no thing. Like they look at the product and they actually determine like, oh, is this secure enough, or are there things that you need to do to it? And that's kind of like coming into a building after it's already been built and trying to make it hurricane proof, yeah. Rather than putting it in the original post of the building. And this is something that I've seen with a number of security teams is they tend to come in later in the process, and they're known as that security team, like, yeah. That comes in after. I wasn't personally trained on security. I don't fault Equifax for that. It's actually like, it was a problem with the overall market.
Yeah,
right?
Multiple companies kind of doing the same thing where security is more of, oh yeah, that's something we should be thinking of kind of after the fact of building something or doing something than kind of from the ground up, something everyone's thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your point of like something everyone's thinking of, right? So it's always been this security team, yeah, as opposed to, oh, like actually my whole organization needs to be enabled, right?
Yeah.
And thinking about security.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, what is the pitch for security enablement now?
It's interesting. At the very, very highest levels, and you saw this in Fortune magazine, actually, that the number one concern of CEOs in the United States now, external concern is is cybersecurity threats, right? Above recession, which they know is coming, right? Yeah. It's coming in the next couple of years, yeah. No doubt. But they think that is a bigger threat to their organization than even the recession itself. Yeah. A bigger external threat. So they're concerned about it, right? So they need to develop more a culture of security, right? Like so CEOs realize this. I don't think it's trickled down yet to the rest of their organization because it's still at that super senior level.
Yeah, kind of top level.
The other piece that we're seeing is Equifax was the first company that was ever downgraded by Moody's for cybersecurity risk. And the reason this is important is because other organizations have been hit by breaches in the past. And it didn't have a long-term effect on their stock price.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you, what's the big difference of the Equifax breach as opposed to, like Target or Home Depot and stuff that we were talking about the other day?
Yeah, I mean, so Target, Home Depot, eBay, yeah, all these companies, Marriott, right? Like all these companies were companies that were hacked. And then within 6 months to a year, they were actually back at the same market cap level that they were before, right? So the market had priced in the fact that they were going to get hacked, or they just didn't feel that the information security for those particular companies was important, right? With Equifax, the breach was so large and had such a substantial impact on their business model that that Moody's downgraded the stock, right, to a negative rating, right? And therefore, what we've seen is the market's actually gone up about 10%-ish, maybe a little bit more today, because we're at a record high. But Equifax still hasn't recovered from their pre-breach levels, and it's been about 2 years, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And so this means that they took a long-term hit on their stock to the tune of about $2.5 billion on their market cap. And that's different than what happened with with eBay, with Marriott, because they just recovered. Like, people still went to hotels, they still bought on eBay, they still went to Target and bought their shampoo. And
I think that's something that we've kind of noticed, is that nobody really, it didn't seem that big of a deal because, as you mentioned, these other companies, bounce back, almost immediately, and kind of the scale of time that it's not that big of a deal. But now with Equifax, I mean, 2 years later, they're still seeing the effects of that. And kind of doing a little research, like they had spent, it seems like $1.4 billion on just
infrastructure, legal,
breach cost in general,
new employees, all that stuff, right? So they've really started to embed a culture and infrastructure of security at Equifax. And I think companies need to realize Equifax isn't alone, right? You are also in this situation, and I think CEOs do realize that, right? That's why they said it's their number one concern. Also, Moody's is, I think it's working with a company in Israel on a cybersecurity risk index. So they'll be able to evaluate each company based on their cybersecurity risk.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so once they do that, then that's going to even more price it into the stock. I think it'll affect boards. Boards will have to understand what is the cybersecurity risk of the company. And price it into their company, right? And again, previously you didn't have to do that, right? Because it didn't have a long-term effect. Because of Equifax, it's had that long-term effect, and the market is wised up to the fact that this is actually a permanent risk for a company.
I mean, now we're seeing, way more people way earlier on in the process thinking about security and how it's actually going to affect things, and starting to think that now first instead of last.
Yeah, absolutely. So you need to prepare your IT teams across the board. Eventually, this needs to trickle down to marketing, to finance, right? So they need to understand in their risk models how to price it into a business case.
They always teach everybody about, phishing emails and little things like that.
Sure.
But, this is kind of the next, it's a lot greater of a step. But just being kind of secure top to bottom in your organization.
Absolutely. And I want to make a point that I actually worked at Barclays as well during the credit crisis. And I got the feeling that this security risk market situation is very similar to the credit crisis, right? So I call this the security crisis. Okay. I was responsible for loan products, unsecured loan products and I actually lived in Egypt for this, but for Barclays. And basically, credit risk came in at the end of the process of new product development. And it was oh man, we got to go to credit risk. Our credit's perfect. What's the problem here, right? But then credit risk became a much more ingrained part of my mindset as I was launching new products and developing new products once the credit crisis happened, because it had to be priced into the product differently. And I think that's what we're seeing with security, is that it needs to be priced into all your products. It needs to be priced into your entire company, right? In a different way than what it was before.
It needs to be something that's continuously thought of and implemented with, than just kind of an afterthought, it seems. It's interesting that there's kind of that correlation between the credit crisis that you saw, and then kind of now with security becoming more of a topic that people are talking about.
Absolutely, and more to it's a topic that the most senior people are talking about, right? It's interesting now that instead of, it's not just the maybe the CISO or somebody who's talking about, now it's the CEO and everyone else, the board, that is kind of bringing this up. Hey, this is something we need to focus on. Exactly. So they're thinking of it a little less as a cost center. Like, oh, I got to do security.
Yeah.
Because I just need to do that, right?
Yeah.
They're thinking of it more like, oh, actually, like, I need to do that, support my company, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, like, before it wasn't like that.
Yeah, probably being thought of more now as a cost-saving initiative in the long-term run, you know.
Exactly.
You know, as much as we spend on it now, we're going to spend 2 or 3 or 4 times as much if something happens.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
Know, we're affected by it.
Exactly.
Well, all right. Thanks for stopping by, Leif. Appreciate it.
It's been awesome.
You know, do you have anything else, you know, that you want to expound on, or anything else you want to explain?
No. I'm excited that the companies are wising up to this. I think it's going to help the public quite a bit, protect information in a different way. Particularly, financial services and healthcare organizations are at serious risk of their business model.
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between, you know, like Target or Home Depot, you know, leaking my credit card information. There's a big difference between the hospital I go to leaking all of my patient information and everything like that. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Stopping by. Yeah.